Hey guys, how's it going? It's Al. Week 1 of NFL is finally here, and we have an island game on Thursday night. The Thursday night football single game showdown between the Houston Texans and the Kansas City Chiefs. I could not be more excited for this game. Island games usually suck, right? It's usually two teams that, because of the contract that the NFL has, they have to put everybody on an island game and give them a nationally televised situation at night so that they can highlight every single team in the league. But we have an absolute treat this week with two of the best quarterbacks in the league, two of what I think are going to be, well, obviously Kansas City is going to be one of the highest scoring offenses in the league. I think that Houston also will be a top 10, possibly a top 5 scoring offense this year for a bunch of different reasons that we've talked about on many other videos so far that I've published throughout August. But this is going to be a really fun game to watch. I can't wait to watch it. I can't wait to play single game showdown on it. I'm going to go over a bunch of different lineup builds, and I've got a special guest with us here today. The king of single game showdown, Drewby from dailyroto.com, is going to join us today and talk us through group building, talk us through possible lineup permutations and things that we can do to try and attack these massive tournaments that are out there in DraftKings. It's a $3 million tournament with $1 million up top. I don't think that there is going to be a single winner that is going to be on that, right? It's probably going to be multiple people. But we're going to try and talk about some of the ways that you can build lineups to give yourselves the best chance to be in the top 10%. And maybe if variance and luck is on your side, one of your guys that's in that lineup in the top 10% can do some really fun things in the fourth quarter and push you all the way up into the top 50, possibly the top 10, or maybe you can walk away with the grand prize for that day. As I mentioned, Drewby is here from dailyroto.com. If you want to go check out their stuff, there is a link down below in the description. Daily Roto has a lineup builder that I have used for the last few seasons. I think they do a great job on multiple sports: NFL, NBA, NHL, MLB, golf, with great projections and that optimizer for every one of those sports. Link down below for a 10% discount, or just use promo code SmizzLife at checkout. Colin Drew, aka Drewby, welcome to the show. How you doing today, Colin?
I'm good. It felt like this football season wasn't going to be here. No preseason games, a little bit less reporting from the beat writers, a little bit, chatter on best ball, but not the same as season-long fantasy seasons in the past. But this should be a great game. I think we could see some sloppy football in week 1, but hopefully this opening slate, you couldn't ask for a better setup between two offenses.
I think that the sloppiness is going to be on the side of the defenses. From some of the videos that we saw throughout training camp, offenses should theoretically be well up ahead of the defenses based on the communication and everything that they need to do defensively to cover up all the spaces, and offenses could be having a little bit of a party and a carnival in week 1. But this carnival that we have between Houston and Kansas City is what I really want to get to. I always talk about how I build groups in the optimizer when it comes to building lineups for week 1. So the first thing that I always say, the caveat is, quarterbacks in captain tend to win less tournaments overall. And this encompasses 2 years of data, 100 plus showdowns, lifetime on DraftKings. Quarterbacks just do not win that many of the showdowns. Like over 70% of showdowns are won by running back and wide receivers in the captain spot. But this is a bit of a unique scenario with Mahomes and Watson.
And I think it's unique from multiple levels. Mahomes obviously gets there at captain more than anybody besides possibly Lamar Jackson. And, we're talking about the best quarterback that we have, a lot of offensive weapons. Watson is also interesting, really high upside player. And he's a guy that kind of breaks some of the correlation rules that we like to build. I know I typically like to build quarterback with at least 2 pass catchers, but Watson can generate a lot of offense with his legs. They historically have used him a lot around the goal line, so he generates rushing touchdowns. He kind of breaks some of those rules, and I think that makes this slate pretty interesting as well.
So if we were to build groups in that Daily Roto lineup builder around Mahomes, how would you suggest people build their Mahomes groups? And then we'll do the same for Watson.
The 2 groups we'll build with Mahomes. The first is a captain group, which is clicking the key in the center of the optimizer to create a captain rule for Mahomes when he's the captain. And I'm tossing in all of his pass catchers into here. And I'm going to include Clyde Edwards-Helaire into that mix. I do think that they'll utilize him enough in the backfield. And Mahomes has thrown to running backs in the past. So I'm tossing Edwards-Helaire in that group. I'm tossing Travis Kelce in that group, Tyreek Hill, Sammy Watkins, Mecole Hardman. You can throw Demarcus Robinson in there if you want for 150 max build. And I'm setting that to say at least 2 of these players. And on top of that, I might create a secondary group that says to include at least 1 of Kelsey, Hill, Watkins, and Hartman, just because I don't really want to get like a Demarcus Robinson and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So that's the Mahomes captain group.
So if I go to the Daily Roto lineup builder, and like you said, I go right here, quarterback, here's the captain key. That builds Patrick Mahomes at captain lineups, and then I can add players to that lineup. I got to remember how to do this. Add this player to the working group, so I would add Tyreek Hill, Sammy Watkins, Mecole Hardman, Demarcus Robinson, add tight ends, Travis Kelce, add running back Helaire. Then we go here to groups. That's his group. Use at least, or use between, actually, between 2 and 4.
Yeah, that works.
And then
I think
save.
at least 2 is... Yeah.
At least 2 does about the same thing. I just need this to be here. Boom. Save. That is now a group for me in my groups. I can do the same thing for, as we said, Deshaun Watson. We can add Deshaun Watson to our captain, do the same thing on Daily Roto to add him into the captain spot, and talk me through the Deshaun Watson group that you're going to build.
Yeah, the Watson one, I'm still a little bit on the fence with. I know for sure I want him at captain with at least 1 of his pass catchers, definitely throwing Will Fuller into that group, definitely throwing Brandon Cooks into that group, throwing Randall Cobb, Kenny Stills into that group, probably throwing both tight ends in there. And I think one of the hard things is not understanding for sure how they're going to utilize David Johnson in this opening slate, not understanding for sure how they're going to utilize Duke Johnson for this slate. And so those are 2 guys that can catch passes. If I was going to set a group for at least 2 with Watson, I'd include those running backs. If I'm going at least 1, I'm probably just going to focus on those top, 3 wide receivers.
Okay. And there's a lot of unknown with this Texans team because of how many targets were vacated last year? Was it 100 and theoretically 170 targets on a year in, year out basis for Hopkins, which is about where he lands? Gone. So now those targets have to be sprinkled. Not one person is going to just take up that D-Hop role and get all of the targets that he had. So now we're looking at, is Fuller going to get a little bit more? Cooks is brand new to the team. Is his target percentage going to be 15, 18, 21, or 25%? I think there's a lot of range there. So if you build lineups or build a set of lineups for this slate, I would suggest picking where you want to be and not just being vanilla. And when I say being vanilla, I think that far too many people use any lineup builder, Daily Roto's lineup builder specifically, by just saying, well, these are the projections and I'm going to go with them. For Showdown, I tend to go with like the 75th percentile because I want to capture as much upside and I want to steer myself away from the median projections in any projection set that have quarterbacks are always going to have a higher median projection than position players, but position players is what wins you single game Showdown.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And there's also for the Texans positional battles where we don't necessarily know yet whether Randall Cobb will start in the slot, whether or not Kenny Stills will kind of split that load with Cobb and with Cooks, a guy that has more familiarity in the offense but less talented overall. So with some of those guys, if you don't want to take a huge stand, neither of them are going to pop as core plays based on their current projections, but there is some volatility and it's possible that one of them plays 100% of the snaps. So I often use the volatility setting in the optimizer to add a little bit more variance to those individual projections than I do kind of the standard players where we know what their role is going to be on a week in or week out basis.
Fair. On this slate, because of the 2 teams that we have and the high octane offenses and the all pro players that are at so many different positions up and down the lineup, it seems to me, and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it's just sticker shock from not having football since January to play in Showdown, that we've got much higher prices in terms of the captain spots here. Mahomes at 18.9, Watson at 17.7, Tyreek at 15.6. Let me bring up the screen share so that everybody can see it. Travis Kelce at 13.8, the Fresh Prince of Helaire at 13.2, Fuller at 12K. A lot of dudes sitting at really high prices. Even AJ McCarron at 11.7, where like the backup quarterbacks are typically 6K. They usually sit at 9K for a captain spot on a week-in, week-out basis, if I remember correctly from last year. So how are we dealing with this? Is it going to be tougher to fit in all the guys that we want? So we've mentioned that you want to have a pass catcher, or sorry, you want to have a running back or wide receiver or tight end as your captain spot. And Kelsey is essentially just a glorified wide receiver. He's not your typical tight end. Tight ends don't win showdown tournaments all that often, but there are some guys that are outliers like Kelsey. So if we were going to build a lineup around, let's say, Will Fuller at captain, because he's got as much big splash ability as somebody like Tyreek Hill, how would you go about building your captain groups around Will Fuller? And then we'll talk about how we can do that with other wide receivers or running backs in this game.
Yeah, the Fuller one is a simple one for me. I'm just creating a captain key for Fuller and pairing him up with Watson, knowing that if Fuller gets there, especially on a slate that is supposedly going to be this explosive, Watson's definitely going to have a big game as well. This rule, I think it holds true like 75% of the time. So it's not 100% guaranteed. There's always a chance that Mahomes outscores Watson, but Fuller's still the captain. But I'm willing to go on the side of what happens 75% of the time opposed to 25% of the time.
I mean, look, if I told you that we're going to flip a coin and one side of the coin is going to show up 3 times, 75% of the time, the other one's going to show up 25% of the time, you're always calling. If heads is 75%, you're going to call heads every time, because each flip you have that 75% chance of winning. So each showdown slate, if you have a wide receiver, they are paired with their captain in winning lineups. A wide receiver at captain that ends up winning, 75% of those wins are paired with their quarterback. So if you flip that or roll that 4-sided die that many times, and 75% chance of every single roll or every single flip is going to come up one way, you should be building your lineups that way. So for every pass catcher that we have, that we're going to have at captain, I'm going to be building a captain group or a captain key group with that wide receiver paired with their quarterback. So Fuller and Cooks and Cobb or Tyreek Hill or Kelsey or any of their pass catchers are going to be paired with their quarterbacks for me. Now, what about running backs as the captain? So somebody like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who is set the draft world on fire. He's a first round draft pick, going as high on average at around 6. I've seen him go as high as 2 in some drafts for stacking purposes in best ball drafts. But like, how do you deal with your captains groups revolving around a running back?
Yeah. And it's a little bit nerdy here, but there is the ability to create a correlated key boost in the daily roto optimizer, which lets you input correlations for that running back. And that's what I like to do with the running back position. I think Edwards-Helaire, if he's going to be the captain, it means that he's stepping immediately into a very large role in the offense. That means that Darrell Williams is still viable, but probably playing a little bit more limited. It's not going to be a timeshare if we're seeing a spike stealing game from Edwards-Helaire. So typically what I would do there is I'd create a correlation that says, if I'm using Edwards-Helaire, then decrease the projection of Darrell Williams by 20% using the correlated key boost. Oftentimes I'll also throw the opposing team defense into that type of group so that I know that if I've got him at the captain spot, typically it's going to mean the other team's defense also isn't having a good game. So I think you can Google DraftKings stacking matrix and find a couple different articles, one from 4for4 from a couple years ago, that can kind of give you some loose correlations if you do want to use key boost to create captain rules for the running backs.
And this is kind of how that looks. I keyed Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I've got Darrell Williams in there. I've got the Houston Texans in there. So I would be using exactly 0, or not exactly 0. I'm just going to be using what? At most 1?
So you can either do it with using 0 if you want, or what I actually like to do is there is a button for key boosts on the optimizer.
Right here.
So once you create that rule, kind of next to where it says with, without, there's a little like up arrow with 3 bars next to it. And if you click that, instead of forcing a rule, it lets you input a negative correlation for those players.
Right there. Boom. So we can make them 10% lower. You can't really see it on the screen because it's off to the right. But it's just over here, off to the right here. There's a key boost button, and then I can reduce them by 10% for each one of those groups. What else do we need to be looking at for this slate? So
I think the big thing is positional battles, where we think that we know, but we don't really know. What we do know is that players will be competing with each other. And so I think for me, I'm happy to use Randall Cobb on some lineups. I'm happy to use Kenny Stills on some lineups. I probably don't want to use Randall Cobb, Kenny Stills, and Cooks on any lineups together. So I'd probably create a rule for them, play at most 2 of those players, because they'll probably be competing for all of the wide receiver snaps opposite Fuller. On the Chiefs side, I would probably do something similar with Sammy Watkins, Mecole Hardman, Demarcus Robinson, kind of falling into that same thing. I'm okay playing these fringe players in lineups. A lot of times these players are what wins lineups or creates low-owned lineups where you're duplicating with fewer people. I just don't want them all entering the same lineup.
Exactly. So you'd build a group, let's say, with the non-primary wide receivers. So you'd leave Kelsey and Hill out of that one. You'd build a Watkins, Hardman, Robinson lineup, and say max of 1 or max of 2. At most 1 or at most 2 of any of that trio in any lineup. Same for the Houston pass catchers. Last thing that we have to talk about, the 2 D Johnsons in the game, Duke Johnson and David Johnson. How are we handling them in week 1?
I mean, to be honest, we don't really know what the roles they're going to play are. We don't necessarily know whether David Johnson is going to be used in a pass catching role that eats into Duke Johnson or not. I'm probably not wanting to get those 2 guys into the same lineup together. Personally, with that risk, I'll probably increase the volatility on both of their projections a little bit, but then set rule to play at most 1 of them on the lineup, or I'll create a rule that says for like David Johnson lineups, decrease Duke Johnson's projection by 20%. Because I just think, especially as underdogs, it's not the situation where you want 2 running backs from the same team. I'd much rather play Edwards-Helaire and Darrell Williams if the Chiefs kind of run over the Texans on the same lineup than it would vice versa.
And Williams gets some mop-up duty, maybe runs in 1 short yardage touchdown with him as the primary backup early in the season.
Yeah.
Well, Colin, thank you for joining us. If you guys want to find any of his work, his Twitter link is going to be down below in the description, as well as a link to Daily Roto, where you can subscribe to get all of the stuff that's behind their paywall, including their optimizer, their projections for 17,000 different sports, as well as the optimizer that works with all of those projections, because an optimizer is only as good as the projections that go into it, and all of the content, all of the articles and podcasts that they do over there. Colin, thank you for joining us today. I appreciate you being here.
Good luck, everybody.
Good luck in week 1, guys. We'll see you later. Bye.
He's a legend.